The smell of chlorine still haunted Helen Miller, even after 20 years. No matter where she was, the supermarket, the doctor's office, even her own home, a whiff of that pungent chemical odor would constrict her lungs and drag her mind back to that cursed summer of 1995. The summer her 8-year-old daughter, Sophia, vanished without a trace from Crystal Lake Water Park in Oak Haven, a small town in rural Pennsylvania. Now, at 43, Helen walked the empty corridors of the hospital where she worked as a night shift nurse. Her footsteps echoed in the deathly silence, a steady rhythm she'd learned to use as an anchor to maintain her sanity. Working nights was a deliberate choice. Fewer people, fewer questions, fewer pitying glances that had followed her ever since she became the mother of the girl who disappeared from the park. During the day, she slept with the aid of medication that numbed not only her body, but also the memories that insisted on sprouting like weeds in abandoned land. But on that October night, something different hung in the air. The phone on the nurse's station rang at 3:47 a.m., a jarring sound that sliced through the silence like a knife. Helen answered with the automatic efficiency of someone who'd repeated the same gesture for years, but the voice on the other end sent a chill down her spine. "Helen Miller?" The voice was raspy, hesitant. "This is John Smith, the caretaker of the old Crystal Lake Water Park. I need to talk to you. It's about your daughter." The phone slipped from her trembling hands, hitting the floor with a clatter that reverberated through the empty corridors. Helen snatched it up quickly, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. What did you say?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "I found something you need to see. I can come to you, or would it be better if you came here? It's important." Helen closed her eyes, feeling the world spin. 20 years. 20 years since the official search was called off, since investigators declared Sophia presumed dead. 20 years since Helen had started living as a ghost of herself, wandering between hope and despair. "I'll be there," she managed to say, her voice regaining a firmness she hadn't felt in decades. "Where?" "The park's still there, but abandoned. Main gate, 7 a.m., and bring a flashlight." The line went dead, leaving Helen alone with the hum of the air conditioning and the sound of her own rapid breathing. She looked around the ward, at the patients sleeping in their beds, oblivious to the earthquake that had just shaken her existence. With mechanical movements, she notified her supervisor that she needed to leave for an urgent family matter, a half-truth that burned her throat like bile. The drive back to Oak Haven was a 2.5-hour torture. Helen drove her old Chevy along the dusty roads of rural Pennsylvania, the familiar landscape unfolding outside her window like frames of a poorly edited film. She hadn't been back to that town since Sophia's symbolic funeral, 5 years after the disappearance. There was no body, only a small, empty urn and a pile of withered flowers under the scorching sun. As she approached the park, the memories intensified. Sophia running between the water slides, her brown hair flying in the wind, her crystal-clear laughter echoing from the kiddie pool area. "Mommy, come play with me," she had yelled that fatal morning, waving from the edge of the shallowest pool. Helen had been too busy packing beach things, applying sunscreen, chatting with other mothers. "I'll be right there, sweetie," she had replied, not knowing those would be the last words she'd exchange with her daughter. Crystal Lake Water Park had closed just 2 years after Sophia's disappearance. The investigation revealed several safety violations, but no explanation for the girl's vanishing. She simply disappeared in the blink of an eye, as if the earth had swallowed her whole. Security cameras showed Sophia playing in the kiddie pool at 2:32 p.m., but there were no more records of her after that. It was as if she had materialized out of thin air. Helen parked in front of the park's rusty gate, her hands trembling as she turned off the engine. The once colorful and cheerful structure was now covered in graffiti, weeds growing between the cracks in the concrete. A faded sign still proclaimed Crystal Lake, fun for the whole family, but the letters were chipped and some were missing, creating a fragmented and sinister message. A man of about 60 emerged from the undergrowth, moving with the caution of someone who knew every hole and obstacle on the terrain. John Smith was thin and stooped, with graying hair and calloused hands that spoke of decades of manual labor. His eyes, however, held an intensity that contrasted with his frail appearance. "Mrs. Miller?" he approached slowly, as if afraid to startle her. "I'm John. Thank you for coming." Helen nodded, unable to form words. She was back at the epicenter of her nightmare, the place where her life had shattered into 1,000 fragments she had never been able to fully reconstruct. "What did you find?" she finally managed to ask. John looked over his shoulder, as if afraid of being overheard, even though they were the only living beings visible in that desolate place. "It's better if I show you, but I need to tell you a few things first." He paused, his eyes fixed on the ground. "I worked here when your daughter disappeared. I helped with the search, scoured every corner of this place. But there were areas that were restricted." "Restricted how?" "The park owner, Maurice Castle, had some strange schemes. He said they were for special clients, but he never let anyone near certain areas. There was a section in the back, near the engine room, that was always locked. He said it was dangerous, full of electrical equipment." Helen felt a chill run down her spine. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because Castle died last month, heart attack, and his family hired me to clean up the park before demolition. That's when I found the keys to the restricted area." John pulled a rusty keyring from his pocket. "What's in there? Ma'am, I think your daughter never left this place." Helen's legs gave way, and she had to lean against the gate to keep from falling. 20 years of therapy, medication, trying to accept the loss, and now this. The possibility that Sophia had been there all along, a few feet from where she had searched desperately. "Show me," she said, her voice a low growl. John opened the gate with one of the keys, and they walked in silence along the overgrown paths. The park was an amusement cemetery, with cracked slides and empty pools filled with rotting leaves and trash. Helen could hear the ghostly echo of children playing, a sound that existed only in her tortured memory. They passed the pool where Sophia had last played. Helen stopped for a moment, closing her eyes and taking a deep breath. She could smell sunscreen and melted ice cream. She could hear Sophia's voice calling for her. "Mommy, come play with me." "This way," John murmured, guiding her down a path she didn't remember seeing before. They rounded the main engine room and arrived at an area surrounded by "Danger, Restricted Area" signs. John used 2 different keys to open the padlocks, and the gate creaked open. On the other side was a smaller complex, almost hidden by vegetation. 3 small circular pools connected by narrow canals, and in the center, a concrete structure that looked like some kind of underground observatory. The whole structure had a sinister air, as if it had been designed to hide something. "This was never on the park's official blueprints," John explained. "I found out Castle built this after the park opened. I always thought it was strange, but he paid well for me not to ask questions." Helen approached the first pool, now empty and covered in mud. In the bottom, almost invisible under the accumulated dirt, was something that stopped her heart. A small blue plastic bracelet, the kind kids received at the park entrance. She knelt at the edge, trembling. "Sophia wore a bracelet like that," she whispered, "blue with golden stars." John approached, his breath heavy. "There's more, in the middle building." They headed for the concrete structure. The door was locked, but John found the right key after a few tries. The interior was plunged into darkness, and the air carried a smell of mildew and something else, something sweet and sickening that Helen couldn't identify. John switched on a powerful flashlight, and the beam revealed something that made Helen scream. The walls were covered in photographs, hundreds of them, all of children playing in the park. But they weren't normal photos. They were images taken from strange angles, through plants, from a distance, as if the photographer was hiding. And in the center of the wall, enlarged and framed, was a picture of Sophia. She was getting out of the kiddie pool, water dripping from her small body, her face turned to the camera with a surprised expression. The photo had been taken on the day of her disappearance. Helen recognized the striped swimsuit Sophia was wearing, the same one she had described to the police in painful detail. "Oh my God," Helen murmured, approaching the wall. "Oh my God, what is this?" John illuminated other areas of the room. There was old photographic equipment, a makeshift darkroom, and file after file of photographs organized by date. It was like entering the sick mind of a predator. "There's more," John said, directing the flashlight to a corner of the room. "I found this yesterday."
It was a small table with drawers, like the ones doctors use in their offices. But on it were objects that made Helen stagger back. A Barbie doll with brown hair cut the same way Sophia wore hers, a small pink sandal size 28, and a letter in a child's careful handwriting. With trembling hands, Helen picked up the letter and read, "Mommy, Uncle Maurice said you don't want me anymore. He said I'm going to live with him now and that you'll never find me. He said that if I'm a good girl, maybe one day he'll let me see you. I want to go home. I'm very scared. It's dark and cold down here. Please find me. I love you. Sophia." Helen collapsed to the floor, sobbing from the depths of her soul. 20 years of doubt, of blaming herself for not paying enough attention, of imagining her daughter suffering somewhere far away. And she was there, in that horrible place, a few feet from where Helen had searched desperately. "Where is she?" Helen screamed, grabbing John's arm. "Where is my daughter?" John hesitated, his eyes full of deep sadness. "There's one more thing. Under this room, there's a kind of basement. I found the entrance yesterday, but I didn't dare go down alone." He pointed to a corner of the room where some floorboards seemed loose. Helen approached and saw that there was indeed an opening there, with a wooden staircase descending into the darkness. A putrid smell rose from the hole, mixing with the already stale air of the room. "I'm going down," Helen said, taking the flashlight from John's hands. "Ma'am, maybe we should call the police first." "No," Helen turned to him, her eyes blazing with a fury that had been banked for 2 decades. 20 years, John. 20 years I've waited for answers. I'm not waiting another minute." She began descending the stairs, each step creaking under her feet. The flashlight illuminated a small subterranean compartment, damp and fetid. The walls were raw concrete, and the floor was covered in wet straw. In one corner there was a small bed with soiled and torn sheets. In the other, a table with remnants of rotting food. And then Helen saw her. In the back of the compartment, almost hidden by the darkness, there was a human form. Small, still, wearing the remnants of what was once a striped swimsuit. Helen let out a scream that echoed off the concrete walls, a primal sound of pain that came from the depths of her maternal soul. She approached slowly, the flashlight trembling in her hands. It wasn't Sophia, not anymore. It was just bones and some tissue, but Helen recognized every detail. The blue bracelet was still on the tiny wrist, the golden stars almost invisible under the grime. "Sophia," she whispered, kneeling beside the remains of her daughter. "Mommy's here, sweetheart. Mommy finally found you." She remained there for long minutes, holding the small bony hand, tears falling onto the remains of the child she had carried in her womb, nursed, taught to walk. Her girl had died alone, afraid, calling out for her. Then Helen heard footsteps on the stairs. John was coming down, but there was something different about his movements. He moved with a confidence he hadn't shown before, as if he knew the place well. "John," Helen called out, but something in his expression made her recoil. 20 years, he said, his voice completely different now, colder, more calculating. A mortal chill ran down Helen's spine. You knew?" "Knew?" John laughed, a humorless sound. "I helped build this place. I helped Maurice with everything." Reality hit Helen like a speeding train. John hadn't discovered anything he had always known. He had participated in the horror that had cost his daughter's life. "Why?" she screamed, backing up until she hit the wall. "Why did you do this to her?" "It wasn't supposed to be like this," John said, approaching. "It was just supposed to be a scare, to take some pictures. But she started screaming, calling for you. Maurice panicked and—" He paused, his eyes fixed on the floor. "It was quick. She didn't suffer much." Helen looked around, searching for an escape, but John blocked the stairs.